Well, hello everyone. If I have not met you before, I am Julie Savage, the Grassroots Leadership Manager for Great Old Broads for Wilderness. I am based in Georgia, but I help support our 37 broadbands across the country. And before we welcome Mary for the main event, I just want to let you all know this is a webinar format. So we have the chat disabled, but if you have any questions, we're going to hold off till the end. You can put those in the Q&A box while Mary is talking, and we'll facilitate those at the end. Or you can raise your hand and I can give you permission to talk too. But please hold off on the end for those questions. And otherwise, I'll send it on over to Mary, who's kindly put this together.
Okay, let's see if we've got this going right. Let's see. Is that up on the screen?
Yep, you're in business, Mary.
Okay, great. Thank you all for coming. I happen to be a NEPA nerd, have been for about 40 years. And it's, of course, along with almost all the institutions of our government under threat right now. And so I'm certainly aware that this is not the only issue we're facing. I am following developments of all types, just as I think many of you are. But this is important. And what I'm going to try to do is talk about the law today, the National Environmental Policy Act, not the regulations so much as the law. So I'm tried to make, the slides are not very exciting in terms of pictures, but the facts are, I think, helpful for you. I think Julie's going to make a link to this afterwards for you so you can refer to it. So I've tried to make it as, when you're reading it later, it's as self-explanatory as possible. So my goal really in this presentation is that you would understand the law well enough to write to your representative and senators and the public about why we all need NEPA. And I think it'll become clear why it will be important to write to your representatives and senators. We actually kind of do the process of NEPA in our own personal lives. We try to avoid being a bull in a china shop. We try to think out what might go wrong when we're making important decisions. We consider options or pros and cons of alternatives. And that's essentially the thinking in this remarkable law. NEPA is the most copied U.S. law worldwide. Over 100 countries have adopted a form of NEPA. We do NEPA in our personal lives. Shouldn't agencies do this? This is what NEPA requires of the federal agencies. So this little graph, NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act, is a law established by Congress in 1970 and pretty much left alone for 53 years until significantly amended in 2023 by Congress, not Biden. It has two titles. The whole law is only 15 pages long, and the bulk of it is in Title I, and it's that all federal agencies must have procedures to do EISs, EAs, or categorical exclusions may apply. A much shorter section established the Council on Environmental Quality, which is president appointed. It has to have at least 3 members. And over the years, well, 9 years after the law was made, it wrote binding regulations for the EISs and EAs. Just this year, courts have ended this. That's when you hear, oh, NEPA is gone. No, the national binding regulations on agencies are gone. Now CEQ will issue guidance for all the agencies that have to develop procedures to do EISs. So really the question that's before us, and it's not, again, not only in this issue, it's in a lot of issues, is how we're going to act as a nation. Under the Trump administration and Musk, it's kind of move fast and break things. NEPA is long known as the look before you leap law. So you can see it's in head-on with where the Trump administration wants to go. So to distinguish between NEPA and NEPA implementation, which we've called in the past regulations, NEPA procedures can be changed by the administration, the Trump administration, or the Biden, or the Clinton, including the Council of Environmental Quality, which is part of the White House, and procedures can be changed by federal agencies. And Congress can establish what is called categorical exclusions from NEPA, as I think some of you are aware, where large transportation projects, for instance, under the have been excluded from NEPA analysis. But we're talking today about the NEPA, the law, and only Congress can amend or eliminate that. And this is where broads are needed now. So Trump can't touch NEPA, the law, the 15-page law, but Congress can. And as we know, Congress is pretty much doing Trump's bidding. And it was last week that at a gathering of Republicans, Musk said, we just really need to delete NEPA. So all federal, let me see, all federal agency NEPA procedures are still in place. So if you're working with the Forest Service or Corps of Engineers or BLM, their procedures that they've had for a long time, often, are still in place. So they were approved under the original CEQ regulations. They're still working under it. And you can find the regulations for every federal agency at this link. And for instance, the Forest Service NEPA procedures are there. They developed them in 2020. The BLM NEPA procedures were done in 2008. But this is only temporary. The Trump crew is telling all federal agencies to revise their NEPA procedures by February 19, 2026. So these agencies that are short on people are scrambling, and I'm suspecting that the Trump administration will tell them pretty much what to do. So we're in the rest of this presentation focusing on NEPA and Congress, not the implementing procedures. We're going to be hearing about that and dealing with that, for instance, with the Forest Service in the future. So what triggered creation of NEPA in the 1960s? First of all, Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. There was an oil spill that went on the beaches of Santa Barbara, a bunch of wealthy town, by an offshore oil drilling station that had not had to be public about its safety procedures. Also, there were a lot of protests in communities that were being bulldozed to build the interstate highway system without any public input, without any public and environmental analysis. NEPA simply did not exist. And in general, people were seeing that industrialization, urbanization, economic expansion, population growth, all of these and more were having an environmental cost. But NEPA is being chipped at. Congress and agencies with CEQ approval have been declared larger projects as categorical exclusions from NEPA analysis, even though they may have large, significant environmental impacts. Originally, the concept of within NEPA, within CEQ, of CEs was this is something that wouldn't have any significant impact. But if Congress declares something as a categorical exclusion, even if it would have large significant impacts, it gets excluded. And then there were some significant changes in by Congress in 2023, as I mentioned earlier. And one of the biggest was a section called sponsor preparation. A project sponsor, for instance, an oil company or a timber company, can write an EA or EIS for their project, and then the agency merely reviews and approves or denies the EA and EIS. And the sponsor can petition a court if the agency isn't moving fast enough on their project. This is a real problem. It will still have probably public input, but going up against an oil company on a complicated project is going to be challenging. Also in that 2023 changes, it was making clear that if one agency has a categorical exclusion for some kind of project, then another agency can use that same CE. This is a problem, again, chipping away at what NEPA applies to. But NEPA is really important in our and other lives, and it's really important to think about this because federal agencies are permitting and undertaking actions and projects that will affect how hot the earth becomes, how polluted the air will be, how much water will go to whom. Remember, NEPA applies to all federal agencies except the EPA. Which species will survive or go extinct. Their projects involve where roads will be built, which forests will be leveled, where mines will be excavated, where the waste will go, how many fish will remain in the ocean, how marginalized communities will be treated, and on and on. So there are three basic social needs provided by NEPA that we need to defend. One is that all federal agencies must spell out the impacts their projects or permits might cause. All agencies must, according to the law, NEPA as it is now, must consider alternatives and reliable data. There is no other law in the US where an agency has to spell out alternatives to what they would be doing. This is unique to NEPA. And the public must be able to comment. These three things are the basic in the current NEPA. And so no matter how many quote regulations go away, no, and any agency procedures that are developed by February 2026 will still have to have these three things because they are in NEPA, in the law itself. We're in danger right now of losing NEPA to bugaboos. And by definition, that's an imaginary object of fear or something that causes fear or distress out of proportion to its importance. One of the bugaboos is there's an energy emergency and NEPA is delaying energy production, like coal and oil and gas. Or NEPA is delaying the transition to a fossil-free future. For instance, nuclear power plants and the establishment of wind and solar transmission lines. Our forests and communities are succumbing to catastrophic fires, and NEPA is delaying cutting down the forest to make the forest resilient to fire. These are being heard constantly, and this is what Congress is being heard. This is what's in being driven in the media. And so this is what is driving the move to change NEPA even further, even though this, quote, streamlining went on in 2023, and perhaps to just eliminate NEPA. I think it's important we acknowledge that there are real frustrations with some NEPA processes. The NEPA process can take more time than ramming through projects and resource extraction. But most projects can be improved through the process. I know the forest plan revision that's going on in my neighborhood is in its 9th year, and it's hasn't even issued a final EIS for comment yet. But that isn't due to NEPA. A lot of what is blamed on NEPA is a matter of the agencies not having NEPA capability, not having staff, the changing of staff, and also a lot of farming out EISs and EAs to contractors who pile everything in to try with the goal of making it litigation proof, and it can take a lot of time. Also, sometimes communities are simply being not in my backyard and stalling projects that they're fine with them going somewhere else, but not in their backyard. But that again is not the major issue. Generally, public concerns are significant and they should be dealt with, and getting rid of NEPA will mean those concerns are completely ignored. And unfortunately, some groups look on NEPA as, oh, I don't want such a plan, so I'm just going to wait, put in comments, and then we're just going to plan to litigate, rather than contributing to the whole process, looking at options for the agency, helping get the EIS through. So that there is some reality to frustrations with NEPA processes. But unfortunately, the mantra is the problem is NEPA, not the shortage of staff, and not the fact that the project is really a crappy project and really shouldn't be going through. So how do we best respond to express frustrations? One is we need to emphasize that this is a management problem, not a NEPA law problem. Agencies need support in undertaking NEPA in a timely manner. The agencies need to be funded to do NEPA. They are skeleton staff. They're becoming more skeleton staff after the rifts, and they should be funded, and they should rely on contractors only when essential. And any changes that take place in permitting processes need to ensure that marginalized communities are not a target for projects. That was one of the problems that prompted NEPA development, was this ramming federal highways through largely African-American and poor communities where there was less ability of the community to respond, and there was no procedures for responding. We need to ensure that public lands don't become the first place to go for projects and actions. Oh, we need transmission lines, let's just go through public lands. We need to mine for quote, critical resource, let's just go to public lands. There really should be looked at, there should be alternatives on private lands, and you own, and sometimes transmission lines really do need to go through public lands. There isn't another uh, really viable route, but it shouldn't be the first place people go. And public communications need to start at the earliest possible time. And this is a problem with particularly projects proponent EISs. They can come out with something really quickly and have had no communication with the community, no communication as to whether there's endangered species or water resource problems or whatever. And then when the NEPA with the EIS is built, then citizens fight it because they weren't included at the beginning. And processes need to be fair to everyone. And we know all about that. But we must not go back to pre-NEPA. When projects, huge projects, policy-driven approaches to public lands and communities were taken without publicly considering the adverse consequences and without consulting with people that would be adversely affected. And we see it with everything that Musk is doing through Doggy or Doge. They're just ramming stuff through, and it's like, oh, we made a mistake. So and so has been lost now. We can't find that employee, etc. This is the kind of things that happen without NEPA. And it's why he wants NEPA eliminated, because it is a check on what he would want to do. So why are you so important? If you understand the basics of how NEPA works, you can effectively advocate for it. But don't, it's really important for you not to confuse NEPA agency procedures with the NEPA law itself. And realize that most representatives and senators do not understand NEPA. But all they're hearing is these bugaboos to justify projects going forward and thinking, oh, well, we've got to get rid of NEPA because it slows things down too much. And you can provide simple explanations of those three key elements of NEPA and why they're so important to everyone. I really urge you to do something, which is print out your own version of NEPA as amended in 2023. And here you go to nepa.gov, you click on laws and regulations, then laws, and you go to National Environmental Policy Act as amended. Download it. It's only 15 pages. And of those 15 pages, these are the sections you need to read. Section 101, it's about one paragraph long. It is our national environmental policy. It states that that's what the purpose of NEPA is, as the U.S. environmental policy. Section 102 is the section in which it says all federal agency must establish methods and procedures for, quote, detailed statements, which functionally is EISs and EAs. And they say in the law it needs to include effects, it needs to include alternatives, and it needs to state any potential irreversible resource commitments. Section 106 is the guidelines for conducting EISs and EAs, environmental assessments. It says they must use reliable data sources. So that's the law, that they need to use reliable data sources. And what to do about CEs. Section 107C is one paragraph, and it's where the public is mentioned. It says you need to invite public feedback. Now, when NEPA was made in 1970, between 1970 and 1979, when there were CEQ regulations, Courts made clear there were a number of foundational court cases that invite public feedback really means involving the public early on and frequently, and it isn't just, here's your EIS, give us your comment and we'll go ahead with the EIS. So court cases, it's interestingly, in case law, before there were ever the CEQ regulations that were pulled back, courts have interpreted what it means to invite public feedback. Section 108, again, it's just a couple of paragraphs. It's about programmatic EISs and EAs. And Section 111 is definitions of words used in National Environmental Policy Act. I think it's important to read as much of the 15 pages as possible, but really you should download, print out the 15 pages, highlight section 102, 101, 102, 106, that one sentence, paragraph about inviting public feedback. 108 is very short, and 111 is just to help you with definitions of words. So I can't emphasize enough, you need to read it to know what's still there for us. And it's important to actively stand up for NEPA now. I would plead with you to write to your senators and representatives, regardless of whether they're Democrat or Republican, why NEPA is important, and tell a story of how NEPA has been helpful, and ask them if they'll be supporting NEPA. They need to hear that someone loves NEPA, because they're getting this drumbeat from oil companies, coal companies, timber companies, and about how bad NEPA is holding up real progress. And it's important to write a letter to the editor in defense of NEPA. The public needs to hear that someone loves NEPA and realizes that everyone needs it to be able to have input on decisions that can harm them. It isn't about you, it's about everybody. And of course, for a lot of us, that means all species. But when you write stories, try to emphasize good outcomes that you know of through NEPA, how to put it that a better plan was developed, and avoid saying, oh, we were able to stop this with NEPA, we were able to stop that. That is what is feeding into the push to get rid of NEPA. And I'm just going to go through 3 stories, but I think all of you have other stories. I fell in love with NEPA back in the early 80s, when the U.S. Forest Service was spraying herbicides all over the Pacific Northwest, over the national forests and all the communities that were living rurally within those forests. And they lost in court 3 times because they wouldn't admit that herbicides cause cancer, which you have to use reliable data and you have to state what might happen with your project. And what it ended up with is the Forest Service ended all its aerial spraying in Oregon and Washington, and really nationally, and replaced it with the current tree planting methods. And that would not have happened if NEPA hadn't been there. I was involved in a freeway that was going to be built through a rare wetland in West Eugene in Oregon. And it was halted because the Army Corps of Engineers wouldn't consider any alternative. And twice in that 15-page NEPA law, it mentions agencies have to consider alternatives. And what the city did, some business people, enviros, and local government people got together and addressed the traffic problems without the freeway. But the only thing that really stopped that was that the Army couldn't think of any alternative to just building the highway through the wetlands. And that current 9-year-old draft EIS for the forest plan near me, it will be litigated because we submitted an entire alternative and it isn't showing any range of alternatives at all. It just has it has a forest plan, and the whatever alternatives are address less than 6% of the features of the forest plan, and that's just not gonna it's not gonna last in court. So I'm I I think we've lived with NEPA for 55 years now, and we need to imagine it gone, that the agencies don't have to state what may go, what impacts their projects will have, that agencies don't have to consider any alternatives, and agencies don't have to consider public comment. So that's my pitch. I really, really hope you will take this to heart, to write a letter to your two senators and your representative, and be an advocate for NEPA, because we could lose it all. And with that, I think Julie's probably following any questions or put anything into the Q&A that you'd like, but we do
Yes.
have time.
Wonderful. Mary, first, thank you so much for the presentation. And we do have folks already in the Q&A, so you can put your comments in the question and answer section, or you could raise your hand and I'll give you permission to unmute and ask your question over voice, whatever you prefer. A first thing, a couple of the comments, just wanted to note that the NEPA website is not available at the moment. And NEPA.gov is currently redirecting to ceq.doe.gov, which give a 503 error or service is unavailable. Do you know about that, Mary?
That's funny because I was on that today. That just must be a little glitch. It does exist, and I was accessing it just today. So I don't know what's going on. It
Okay.
should be able to go to NEPA.gov. You could go to Council on Environmental Quality, because they all do exist.
Okay, and Pam did find a copy of the act itself, so we will provide that in a follow-up with the recording for sure. And those resources, we can provide those links.
And you always need to be careful that it is the NEPA as amended in 2023. And, because for years I kept a little copy of the booklet of NEPA, and those regs are not correct now, because NEPA itself has been changed.
Okay, and then some more questions. Well, first I said thank you for the presentation. Will EO or Executive Order 14225 trigger a new or supplemental NWFP amendment DEIS process, and therefore under NEPA a new DEIS public review and comment period, i.e. fix our Forest Act should it pass? Wouldn't it conflict with NEPA?
I guess I don't understand the question.
Okay, let me see. That was from, is it Jajan? If you want to raise your hand, there we go. I'm going to let you talk.
Hi.
Hi, yeah, DJ, I came across as
DJ,
Dijon.
sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Yes,
can
I
hear you.
can.
Good. I was asking whether the executive order for March 1st, 14225, to increase timber harvest immediately will trigger a new Northwest Forest Plan Amendment DEIS process. Because under NEPA, if you change, I mean, it's like a contractual thing. If you change what the Federal Advisory Committee has done to create the Northwest Forest Plan Amendment and to put out the DEIS, they've complied with all the laws to do that. then somebody comes along and changes the terms of timber harvesting. Doesn't that automatically trigger a new DEIS or supplemental DEIS and a new public review and comment period? And then I was also asking, like, basically the same thing. If the Fix Our Forests Act passes, which is passed the House, not the Senate, wouldn't it conflict with NEPA and also trigger a DEIS process?
You know, I really don't know the answers to those questions. Um, if it involves categorically excluding some activities, then there won't have to be an EIS or an EA. And I guess you're talking about the Fix Our Forests Act.
Right, I
I
keep
don't know.
forgetting the number on that one. I haven't read in detail.
If if a if a if a draft EIS was out and an EIS is still going to be a final EIS is going to be issued, it would seem it will have to go back to the draft EIS because a final EIS cannot have anything in it that the public didn't see at the draft EIS. In other words, a draft EIS can have several alternatives and it can pick and mix and match from those what they presented in the draft EIS for the final EIS. But the final EIS can't have suddenly something new that
Right,
the
and I
public never
think it
saw.
would. I mean, it sounds as if the executive order would create that conflict with NEPA and require a new DEIS process, whereas the Fix Our Forests Act is really more about categorical exceptions and so on. So, I
Okay.
mean, it's hard to say what will happen there, but for those of us who just went through, the comment period that closed Monday for the Northwest Forest Plan amendment, it's like by the time we had submitted our comments on Monday, it felt like it was almost a moot point because the executive order had been issued in the interim, during March, and it's like it kind of negates the whole thing. So
Okay.
it seems, which is a big
So
deal,
let me ask you a favor. Send the question to me at maryobrien10@gmail.com, and I know where to get the answer, and I'll email you back.
Oh, great. Okay, maryobrien10@gmail.com.
Yeah, no, the 10 for 10 and no
10.
spaces, no anything. Okay?
Great. Thank you so much, Mary. Appreciate this, timely presentation. And I had made a note in the comment box too that the CEQ website seemed to be down. When I went to the CEQ website the other day, it redirected to the White House site. So I think that just in general, a lot of sites are being taken down or redirected. And so I'm thinking it might be time to find the good old local reference librarian that the university or some, people who have hard copy of government materials or ways to get them. So thanks
Well,
again.
I just, on my cell phone, it said service unavailable. That is so strange because earlier today I was accessing it and checking on something. So I think that's another thing I'm going to get back um, to you all and see if that's just a glitch today or whether something bigger is going on. Because again, NEPA doesn't go away. Julie, I have a copy of it, of the NEPA as amended, and can send that to Julie. She can send it to all of you who are on the um, on the presentation today. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, DJ.
Yeah, sure. And DJ, it's like we all know things are changing every minute, but that's why this presentation didn't focus on regulations that are in flux. Different agencies are going to be developing new procedures for doing their EISs and EAs. And I'm backing up to the act itself and saying that's our foundational act. And whatever procedures the agencies develop by February next year, they still have to comply with NEPA unless we lose NEPA. And they will still have to have those three things. Analysis of environmental impacts, consideration of alternatives, and public input. Those are the three things that are foundational.
And Mary, thinking about the public input portion, someone asked section 107C says each notice of intent to prepare an EIS shall include a request for public comment on alternatives and impacts. Why is this language listed as applicable to NOIs for EISs? Obviously, the regs had a more expansive view of public involvement. Do you know what court cases expanded this requirement to EAs and EISs and not just NOIs? Isn't this provision open to new interpretation and a narrow reading?
I can't off the top of my head name the court cases, but this is a good one, again, for me to get back to you. And I think by early next week, you'll all get an email with that too, because for a lot of this, one of my best friends is Dinah Bear, who was senior attorney at Council on Environmental Quality for about 20 years through 4 different presidents. And she's kind of Ms. NEPA in the US. She knows everything. And I was saying to myself, I was asking her the same question you're asking. Why it doesn't appear that the public is mentioned much in NEPA itself. That's the one place it is. And she said, actually, it's a weakness of NEPA. But those court cases, which I'll get a list to you, that interpreted what that means during those 9 years before there were ever, quote, regulations from CEQ, spelled out the much more, what does it mean to have public comment? It can't mean, the courts basically said, it can't just mean, oh, we're sorry this project has gone through. It needs to have robust public comments. And then when the regulations were built by 2009, they were building on these court cases and figuring out how do you have robust public comment, on scoping, on the draft EIS, on the final EIS, and so on. So I can get the names of those court cases to you as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary. And I'm also going to unmute Erica, who has her hand raised.
Hi, Erica. I think you're on mute. I see the little slash through your microphone.
Erica, are you still there?
Can you hover over the bottom and click on
Oh, there
audio?
she is.
There you go.
Apologize. You actually did just answer my question, but and I too would like to talk to Dinah, who I know, about why it just says notice of intent. That's so weird. And so those court cases would be really helpful. And thank you. Sorry, I didn't realize that you would get to my question.
And I
need to click on
think it is mentioning notice of intent because that's the earliest time, and that's a signal in NEPA that says, don't wait till the end to tell the public.
Okay.
Tell them when you're intending to undertake a project. And that's where then the ball kept rolling. Well, then how does the public have comment? But yes, I will get the names of those cases, and then those are ones that can be looked up. And oftentimes you can look up a case on the web, you probably know this, and someone will have summarized it somewhere. I think cases, if you have the time, of good opinions are wonderful to read, but oftentimes what you really want to know is what the key findings were. And you can often find that if you put the name of the court case into the web and get a summary.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it just seems like a real vulnerability of the new NEPA for any agency procedures. They could say, okay, we're just gonna notice this and then never have any public input. So,
Well, and that's why and in fact, because the last couple days I've been talking to Dinah before doing this presentation, and she knew I was doing this presentation, she said, you're right, Mary, we need to address this. And right as we speak, or this week, she is, as a result, writing out a piece on public comment and the history of development of public
Right.
comment and what it's based on. So this is going to be really important. And I'm going to encourage her to finish that. She sent me a beginning draft, and it's going to be really helpful.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'll ask her for it too. Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Erica. So Jenna, and I'm sure others are thinking about this too, said, I thought there was a comment period open on regulations.gov till March 25th about changing NEPA. And then followed up with, maybe this is about regs only, but maybe you can expand upon, Mary, what the comment period is for and what they're looking for that.
That's exactly true. It's about this change, and it's about regulations. So I haven't followed that as much. I think the comments are going to be made. There are going to be some extensive comments from particularly the national organizations that have full-time staff looking at this and so on. But my impetus for this presentation was really, again, conversations with Dinah. She's saying, we gotta save NEPA itself. And of course, when our various agencies that we deal with are redoing their regulations by February next year, I'm sure there's going to be processes around that. I hate to say that the comments by March are going to be comments for what effectively is a done deal, but to some degree, that's where we're at. We really have to focus on saving NEPA so that those agencies really do have to have new procedures next year, and we can live to see the day that we comment on those. I can guarantee you the Trump administration isn't going to encourage the agencies to speed everything up, do the absolute minimum, and that itself will be have to do with public reaction and so on. But in the end, without NEPA, the agencies won't have to do new procedures at all. They won't have to do EISs.
Well, Mary, relating to this, and maybe you've already answered this, but are there specific bills in Congress now that aim to eliminate or water down NEPA that we should refer to when contacting our Congress representatives? Okay.
No. Now, remember, Congress did a lot of, it was an interesting battle in 2023. Congress, there were bills that would have done much worse changes to NEPA. And sometimes we can get frustrated with those far off national environmental organizations that aren't grassroots and so on, but they did a huge job heading off the worst of the changes. What came out in 2023 from much effort of lobbying on the Hill, what came out was much less worse than it would have been. So right now, there's no bill or proposal in Congress, but when you hear Musk in his meeting with Republican senators getting a bunch of cheers last week when he said, let's just delete NEPA, you know we're in trouble. So I think even in the absence, and I know I'm going to be writing, and in fact, this Friday, Dinah has asked me to write to the House Natural Resources Committee because they're going to be considering something. And she asked just, by this Friday, which is 2 days from now, I need to write a letter. It's not anything that, we have time to get things out on right now. But Broads is so important because we're across the whole country. And we have stories from different ecosystems and different monuments and different wildlife and different tribes, different communities that are at risk. And so we're in a good place for doing grassroots input to a lot of senators and representatives that we know we are out here, we are believing that NEPA is important for everyone. So I'm urging you to just write in support of NEPA at this point, and maybe later you have to write and call and so on when there's a specific move to delete NEPA. But right now, really, we need to get support in. I know it's hard to sit down because we're not facing a specific law or move, but it just puts in that representative or senator's mailbox, there's people out there who are realizing how critically important this is. If they focus just on energy and take away NEPA, they're taking it away from oceans, from national parks, from the Army Corps, from the Army itself. The Department of Army is one of the best at doing NEPA, surprisingly, in part because it's a well-funded agency, so they have lots of good NEPA staff. It's everywhere. So it's kind of like throwing baby out with the bath, to be focusing on how fast you can get a coal mine approved.
And then I have unmuted or allowed Carrie to ask her question.
Hi, Mary. Thank you very much for the great presentation and kind of getting out in front of the NEPA issue. I've been working with Gail Harris, and we've been working on putting together comments on the current rule change that's for the CEQ, elimination of the CEQ regulations. And I think it's still a great opportunity for people to comment. I suspect you're right that it will be a final rule that will remove those regulations by April 12th. But I think it's really important that CEQ hears about how important NEPA is to us and the requirements under the implementing regulations from CEQ. So I've been working.
I do. I agree with you, Carrie, and it's just something that I wasn't addressing because not yet are people really facing the reality that NEPA itself may go. But you can, at the same time you're writing that letter by the deadline, you can be talking about NEPA as a whole at the same time.
Yeah, and
Because you're right. You're writing about the regulations, and in essence, you're writing about how public input and what kind of considerations should be in place.
well, I
So,
think the scary part is Trump with his executive order 14154, and then they also wrote, so that essentially removed the authority for CEQ to implement the regulations, plus the 2 court cases. But then the CEQ also directed the federal agencies in the memo dated February 19th to not consider cumulative impacts. They kind of were a little bit washy on how they said that, but essentially not consider cumulative impacts, not consider environmental justice, rewrite it with the streamlined deadlines. And so essentially what's going to result from all that is going to be no consideration of impacts to minority communities and disproportionate impacts on those communities, and also climate change, probably with cumulative effects not being considered. There's a lot that's being done without opportunity for the public to comment.
well, you're right, except this is the importance, Carrie, of reading NEPA itself.
I
Read that
have a
first,
copy of it. I have a
that
copy of it.
first paragraph, and as long as there's public input, the agency may not want to bring up climate change, but you can in
Yeah,
your
but I think
comment,
they
and
probably
this is,
will.
and
Without the
because,
CEQ regulations, we won't have major federal action definition. So that's a
well,
concern
right.
too.
But remember, this is what happened in the first Trump, in Trump #1. He took away cumulative impacts. Well, this is crazy because life is cumulative impacts, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you
I
can't look at anything in the environment. And so when NEPA says the purpose is to declare a national policy which will encourage productive and enjoyable harmony between man and his environment, to promote efforts which will prevent or eliminate damage to the environment and biosphere. Well, in your comments in the future, whether the agency is mentioning climate change or not, the reality is you send in materials showing that drought is happening and that fire is happening and that floods is happening. And depending on what project you're dealing with, you can base your comments in that paragraph. Do
yeah,
you
I believe
follow?
you're correct. I agree with you absolutely, Mary.
Yep,
I'm just
that's why
fearful with the
it's,
change of definitions for effects
I
that
know.
we may have a much harder time.
We're going to have a much harder time with everything, right? And we got
Yes,
to
that's
hang
true.
together. But
That's right.
that's why I'm emphasizing NEPA, because no matter what they put out, what crap they put out, they've still got to comply with NEPA as long as it exists. And courts will entertain evidence that they are not in compliance with NEPA. And when you talk in that purpose about preventing or eliminating damage to the environment and biosphere, that's what you're going to be talking about in your alternatives and in your comments, whether the agency wants to talk about it or not.
Thank you. I just think it's an opportunity to comment on the Federal
I
Register right
agree.
now.
And I don't want to downplay that. I don't want to downplay that. It's just don't be discouraged when the rules come out just like they say they're going to do,
Yeah, I
right?
suspect that'll happen.
Don't think NEPA is gone. That's what I hear people saying. Oh, NEPA is gone. No, NEPA exists.
And I think they could be challenged. This is being proposed as an interim final rule, which may not be appropriate when it's changing the requirements so much. So I think it could be
Well,
legally challenged.
Well, it's
And-
interesting though, Carrie, because when you read the 15 pages, CEQ was never charged with making binding regulations.
Yes, I understand that.
And that's what the courts are saying. That wasn't
yes,
in NEPA. What
yes,
they can do is give guidance, right?
they
That's what
can provide advisory. You're right. And I think that should have been their approach instead of just eliminating the regulations. But I also think that they're proposing this as an interim final rule and not giving it due public comment process. To completely eliminate the CEQ regs should go through a more standard review and comment process under the Administrative Procedure Act. So I think it's important to comment, and I agree with you. I think it's,
except that the couple courts now have ruled that they don't have the capacity, they don't have that they are overstepping
yeah,
legally
yeah,
their capacity.
that's the February 3rd court case. Well, there were two. There's one in November
Right.
as well.
Exactly.
CEQ
Yep.
versus Iowa, I think, is the most recent one from February 3rd.
Well,
And there was
Mary and
what was it,
Carrie,
Audubon. Yep.
I hate
gonna
interrupting
have to
people.
quit.
I am so sorry. I hate interrupting, but I'm gonna have to interrupt. I apologize. I wanna respect everyone's time. And first, Mary, thank you again for being here and providing this presentation. And also thanks to all of you who attended and asked so many wonderful questions. I've tried to make note of all of them, and we will send a follow-up email with the recording and hopefully answers to a lot of these questions or further resources and Mary's email. So, because you can tell that Mary's a wealth of information. So I just
Right.
want
So
to,
I will get back to you all about what the names of those court cases are. And if I can't remember her name, sends me that question, I will get it answered too.
okay.
About an ongoing project right now. Okay. And I'm going to check on this NEPA.gov. It may just be a glitch today because earlier today I was accessing it. Okay.
Thanks, Mary. Thank you,
Sure.
everyone.
Thank y'all.